Gentlemen, let's get something straight right now. When a woman stops reaching out, that is not an accident, that is not a mistake, that is a message. We as men often ignore the uncomfortable truth that silence is a form of communication. You must understand that people don't just vanish from your life for no reason. If she was once engaged, once eager to talk, once present in your world, and now she's gone silent, it means something fundamental has shifted. Now, the easy reaction is to panic. You send more messages. You start overanalyzing every little thing. Did you say something wrong? Did you do something wrong? But the deeper question, the one you must have the courage to face, is this: what changed? Silence is never meaningless. It is a force. It carries weight. It is charged with unspoken truths that many men are too weak to face. When she stops calling, stops texting, stops reaching out, it is not because she forgot. It is because something has shifted, something has fractured. And whether you choose to acknowledge it or not, that silence is screaming the truth. Women do not suddenly disengage without reason. Human beings are wired for connection, for communication, for engagement with those who matter to them. When someone ceases to initiate, when the presence that was once so consistent fades into absence, that absence is a decision. And if you fail to recognize that decision, if you convince yourself it's nothing, that is the first sign of your own blindness. You must understand the psychology of withdrawal. It is an act of reprioritization. It is a recalibration of emotional investment. If she was once eager to hear from you, if she once reached out without hesitation, if she once responded in seconds but now takes hours, or worse, never at all, then something in her perception has changed. People do not pull away from what they deeply value. If she stops calling, if she stops texting, it means her subconscious mind has determined that your presence is no longer as essential as it once was. And that realization should shake you. Weak men ignore this shift. They rationalize. They tell themselves she must be busy. They cling to excuses that keep them from confronting the reality that they are no longer at the center of her world. But strong men, men with depth, men who refuse to be blind, listen to the silence. They analyze it. They let it hit them with full force, because the truth, no matter how painful, is the only thing that can set them free. When a woman stops calling or texting, it is not always because of anger. It is not always because of another man. Sometimes it is because of something far worse: apathy, indifferent, the slow erosion of what once was. And indifference is more lethal than hatred, because when someone is angry, they still care. When they argue, when they express frustration, when they react emotionally, it means you still hold power. But when the communication stops, when the energy fades, when they simply stop showing up, it means they have detached. It means they are moving on. And if you do not recognize that shift, you will be left clinging to a ghost. You must train yourself to detect the early signs, the slight delays in response, the drop in enthusiasm, the texts that once carried warmth now feel mechanical, obligatory. The phone calls that were once effortless now feel forced, shorter, empty. These are not coincidences. They are warnings. They are signals that something within her emotional world is shifting. And if you fail to adapt, if you fail to acknowledge reality, you will be caught off guard when she finally disappears completely. Most men panic in the face of silence. They bombard her with messages. They beg for attention. They try to reignite what is already fading by forcing conversation. And every time they do this, they lower their value in her eyes, because desperation is repulsive. It confirms what she already suspected, that you are not as strong as she once believed, that you are not a man grounded in his own worth, but instead a man who relies on her validation for his sense of identity. And once she sees that, it is nearly impossible to reverse. The way you respond to silence defines you. A weak man reacts emotionally, frantically trying to reclaim lost ground. A strong man steps back, he observes, he does not chase. He understands that if someone is withdrawing, there is a reason, and instead of begging for answers, he lets the distance reveal the truth. He does not fill the void with desperate attempts to pull her back. He lets the void speak for itself. Silence forces you to confront yourself. If you are disturbed by the lack of communication, it means you are relying on it for something deeper, perhaps a sense of security, perhaps a sense of identity, perhaps the illusion of control. And when that is taken away, you are left face to face with who you truly are. A man who needs constant reassurance is a man who has not yet built himself into someone unshakable. And that is the real lesson when she stops calling or texting. It is not about her. It is about you. It is about your ability to remain unfazed in the face of uncertainty. It is about your ability to command respect by not lowering yourself in an attempt to regain something that may already be lost. Women are drawn to men who are unwavering, men who do not panic when faced with the unknown. Because that is the kind of man who can lead. That is the kind of man who remains grounded in any storm. But the moment you let her silence consume you, the moment you crumble under the weight of her withdrawal, you confirm her doubts. And those doubts, once solidified, will push her further away than any words ever could. The brutal truth is this: if she wanted to talk to you, she would. If she valued the connection as much as you do, she would not let it fade. People make time for what matters to them. They prioritize the relationships they deem important. And if she is not doing that, then your position in her life has changed, whether you admit it or not. There is no excuse powerful enough to override that reality. What you must do in the face of silence is not react, but reflect. Ask yourself, what changed? What dynamic shifted? Did you become complacent? Did you stop being the man she was once drawn to? Did you lose your edge, your ambition, your purpose? Because attraction is not just about words or gestures. It is about presence. It is about the energy you carry, the way you command yourself in the world. And if she once saw you as a force, but now sees you as an afterthought, then you must take responsibility for that shift. A man who is truly secure in himself does not shift. He does not beg for attention. He does not allow someone's silence to dictate his sense of self-worth. Instead, he acknowledges the reality for what it is. He processes it without emotional weakness, and he continues forward with or without her. Because the moment you become dependent on her response, you have already lost. And that is the lesson that silence teaches you. It is a test of your resilience, a test of your ability to maintain composure, a test of whether you will crumble or rise. She may come back, she may not. That is not what matters. What matters is whether you allow her absence to break you or whether you use it as fuel to become stronger than you were before. Emotional investment is not random. It does not shift without cause. When she stops reaching out, when her calls and texts fade into silence, when the warmth that once existed turns cold, it is because something within her has changed. And if you fail to recognize that change, if you ignore the shifting tides, you will find yourself drowning in confusion while she walks away without looking back. People do not withdraw for no reason. They pull away when their emotions, their needs, their expectations are no longer being met. And whether you want to accept it or not, that means somewhere along the line, something in you stopped being what it once was to her. Maybe you lost your presence. Maybe you lost your focus. Maybe you stopped being the man who once ignited her admiration. But make no mistake, if she has stopped investing in you emotionally, she has already started investing elsewhere. Most men believe relationships run on autopilot. They assume that because a woman once cared, she always will. But this is the mindset of a fool. Affection is not permanent. Tension is not guaranteed. A woman's heart is drawn to strength, to presence, to certainty. The moment she senses complacency, the moment she detects stagnation, the moment she realizes she is more invested than you are, her subconscious begins detaching. And when that detachment begins, it is only a matter of time before her silence follows. Every interaction you have with a woman builds or erodes your place in her mind. If she once hung onto every word you said, if she once felt excitement every time your name appeared on her screen, if she once sought your presence with eagerness and now she doesn't, you must understand that her emotional energy has shifted. And that shift did not happen overnight. It was gradual, it was subtle, and you missed the warning signs because you were too comfortable in the illusion that she would always be there. A woman does not withdraw all at once. It starts with small things, shorter replies, a little less enthusiasm, a delay in response that wasn't there before, a lack of urgency in seeing you. And at first you ignore it. You tell yourself it's just life, it's just stress, it's just a phase. But what you fail to see is that every moment of hesitation, every reduction in effort is a sign that her heart is no longer moving toward you. It is moving away. The worst mistake a man can make is assuming love is static, that once given, it remains forever. that once captured, it cannot slip away. This is the arrogance that destroys relationships. Women do not stay emotionally invested in men who stop evolving. They do not remain drawn to men who stop being a source of inspiration, of leadership, of challenge. A woman's emotions are not dictated by logic alone. They are dictated by the way she feels in your presence. And if she no longer feels that fire, that admiration, that deep-rooted attraction, then her mind will naturally seek it elsewhere. Do not fool yourself into believing she just got busy. Do not lie to yourself that she is just distracted. If she wanted to reach out, she would. If she still saw you as the man who captivated her, she would not allow distance to grow. People always make time for what is important to them. The excuse of being too busy is nothing more than a polite way of saying you are no longer a priority. And the moment you accept that reality, the moment you stop hiding behind denial, is the moment you regain control over your own direction. A woman will always match the energy she receives. If you have stopped leading, if you have stopped being present, if you have allowed yourself to slip into predictability, she will sense it. If you are no longer the man she once admired, she will feel it. And once that emotional disconnect begins, you cannot force it back with words, you cannot fix it by begging, you cannot repair it by demanding explanations, because the truth is, she may not even be able to explain why she feels different, only that she does. Emotional investment shifts when excitement fades. It fades when mystery disappears. It fades when the man she once looked up to becomes a man she merely tolerates. A woman does not want to be needed. She wants to be drawn toward a man who has a purpose beyond her. If your presence is now predictable, if your ambition has faded, if you have stopped challenging her mentally, emotionally, and intellectually, then she has no reason to keep investing. Most men react to this by clinging. They chase harder. They send more messages. They try to pull her back with grand gestures, with forced affection, with apologies for things they don't even understand. But what they fail to realize is that the more they chase, the less attractive they become. The more they seek reassurance, the more she confirms her decision to withdraw. A woman does not respond to neediness. She responds to presence, to strength, to a man who does not crumble when he senses a shift in her energy. A woman's emotional investment is a reflection of the man in front of her. If you are no longer the man she was once drawn to, she will not feel the same way about you. And that is not her fault. That is the brutal law of human nature. You are either growing, evolving, becoming more, or you are fading into the background. And if she has stopped calling, stopped texting, stopped initiating, it means you are no longer at the forefront of her mind. The mistake weak men make is taking this personally. They become bitter. They blame her. They lash out or sink into self-pity as if her withdrawal is an attack on their worth. But strong men understand that every action has a cause. If her emotional investment has changed, it means something within the dynamic changed first. And instead of resenting her for it, a man of depth looks inward and asks himself, what have I stopped doing? What have I overlooked? How have I let my own fire fade? Women are drawn to movement, to ambition, to the force of a man who is constantly evolving, a man who is unpredictable in the best way, a man who continues to challenge her mind, who continues to inspire her, who continues to command respect through action, not words. If you have stopped being that, you cannot blame her for no longer feeling what she once felt. When emotional investment shifts, the response of a weak man is to cling. The response of a strong man is to level up, to refocus on himself, to become so undeniable that her withdrawal becomes her loss. A woman's emotions are fluid, and they respond to the energy you give off. If your energy has become stagnant, if your presence no longer carries weight, then you cannot expect her to keep investing in something that no longer moves her. The moment you stop being a source of excitement, of depth, of leadership, her subconscious begins looking elsewhere for that feeling. And this is not about another man. This is about the loss of something deeper. The admiration she once had for you. If she no longer sees you as someone she looks up to, if she no longer feels inspired in your presence, then her emotions will follow, and no amount of pleading, no amount of convincing will change that. You must wake up to the reality that attraction is not about holding on to someone. It is about continually giving them a reason to stay. It is about being a man who is impossible to ignore, a man who does not need to chase, a man who naturally commands the respect and attention of those around him. If she has pulled away, it is not because of chance. It is because something within you has lost its fire. And until you reignite that fire, not for her, but for yourself, her emotional investment will not return. When she stops calling, stops texting, stops reaching out, it is not because she simply forgot. It is not because she is too busy. It is because the emotional weight that once pulled her toward you is no longer strong enough to keep her there. And the hard truth that most men refuse to accept is that attraction is not built on words, promises, or past moments. It is built on the undeniable presence you carry in the present moment. Women do not disconnect from men they are drawn to. They do not suddenly lose interest in a man who continues to command their respect, their admiration, and their desire. If she has faded away, if her attention has shifted, if her messages have become less frequent, there is a reason. And that reason is rooted in the way she now sees you compared to how she saw you before. Men fall into the trap of believing that once a connection is formed, it is permanent. They assume that because a woman once desired them, she always will. But nothing could be further from the truth. A woman's emotions are in constant motion, adapting to the energy you bring into her life. If that energy becomes dull, if it loses its spark, if it no longer inspires, she will feel it, and she will begin to detach without even consciously realizing why. What most men do when they sense this shift is react out of fear. They reach out more, they try harder, they look for reassurance, trying to force back the version of her that once clung to them. But what they don't realize is that every act of desperation, every needy attempt to reignite what is fading, only confirms what she already suspects, that you are no longer the man she once admired. Because a man who truly understands his worth does not beg for attention. He does not crumble when he senses distance. He does not need validation from someone who is already halfway out the door. A woman does not just stop calling and texting because of external distractions. She does it because the connection she once felt is no longer as compelling as it used to be. If she was once excited to talk to you, if she once made an effort to reach out, and now she doesn't, it is because her emotions have shifted. And emotions do not shift without cause. Either you have stopped being the man she was once drawn to, or something has replaced the way she used to feel about you. A man who understands his own power does not react emotionally when a woman pulls away. He does not chase what is retreating. He does not try to pull her back with empty gestures, with forced conversations, with desperate attempts to remind her of what they once had. Because he knows that attraction is never sustained through words alone, it is sustained through the undeniable force of his presence. If she has lost interest, if she has withdrawn, then the answer is not in chasing, it is in becoming undeniable once again. When a woman pulls away, when her messages slow down, when the phone calls stop, it is because something within her no longer feels drawn to you the way it once did. And that is not something you can argue against. It is not something you can debate or reason with. Attraction is not logical, it is instinctual. It is based on the way she feels in your presence. And if that feeling has changed, you must have the courage to accept that truth instead of fighting against it. Most men crumble when they feel this distance. They lose their composure. They make the fatal mistake of thinking that by pushing harder, by demanding explanations, by trying to force her back into the emotional space she once occupied, they can fix what has already been lost. But a woman does not respond to force. She responds to the presence of a man who remains unshaken. A man who is so rooted in his own strength that he does not need to chase what is slipping away. If she has stopped calling, it means something has changed. And that change did not happen in an instant. It happened over time. It was a series of moments, a slow unraveling, a gradual realization that the way she once felt is no longer the way she feels now. And the most important thing you can do in that moment is recognize the truth instead of clinging to the illusion that nothing has shifted. Because the moment you deny reality, the moment you try to convince her, or worse, convince yourself that nothing is wrong, you have already lost. A man who commands respect understands that attraction is not a guarantee. He knows that the moment he stops being a source of strength, a source of inspiration, a source of unshakable presence, he will begin to fade from her mind. And he accepts that. He does not fight it. He does not panic. He does not break under the weight of uncertainty, because he knows that his value is not determined by whether or not she continues to call. continues to text, continues to seek him out. His value is determined by his ability to remain powerful regardless of who stays or who leaves. Women are drawn to men who are grounded in their purpose, to men who do not waver when faced with distance, to men who are so deeply invested in their own growth, their own mission, their own evolution, that they do not have time to plead for attention. The moment you become dependent on her presence, the moment you begin to seek reassurance from her silence, is the moment she loses respect for you. Because no woman wants to be the center of a man's world. She wants to be drawn into a world that is already powerful on its own. If she has stopped calling, if she has stopped texting, if her energy has changed, then your response determines everything. A weak man collapses, he panics, he overcompensates, he lets the fear of losing her turn him into someone she no longer recognizes. But a strong man does the opposite. He lets her go, he steps back, he focuses on himself, on his own foundation, on his own evolution, because he knows that if he is truly the man he is meant to be, he will never have to chase, he will only have to walk forward. And those who are meant to be in his life will follow. Attraction is never about holding on to someone. It is about being someone they never want to walk away from. If she has disappeared, if she has faded into silence, then the answer is not in chasing, not in convincing, not in desperate attempts to win her back. The answer is in becoming undeniable. The answer is in becoming a force so strong that her absence does not shake you, because you are too focused on building a life that is already too powerful to ignore. Most men fear silence because they believe it is rejection. They believe it is the end. But a man who truly understands his worth does not see it that way. He sees it as a lesson. He sees it as a test. He sees it as an opportunity to refine himself, to sharpen his edge, to become even more than he was before. And that is why, in the end, he never loses, because he never stops growing. When a woman pulls away, it is not your job to chase, it is your job to rise, to become so deeply grounded in your own power that whether she returns or not is irrelevant. Because the truth is, when you become that man, when you embody that level of strength, when you stop seeking and start leading, she will feel it. And whether it is her or someone else, the world will always recognize a man who refuses to be anything less than unstoppable. Silence is not empty, it is filled with meaning. It is the loudest message she will ever send. And if you refuse to hear it, if you ignore what it means, if you pretend it's just a phase, you are lying to yourself. A woman's silence is never accidental. It is never without reason. It is the result of something shifting inside her, something breaking, something losing its meaning. You must understand that people do not remove themselves from what they still desire. They do not ignore what still excites them. They do not walk away from what sets their soul on fire. If she has gone quiet, if she has stopped trying, if she no longer looks for you the way she once did, it is because her heart is no longer in it. And once a woman reaches that point, once she disconnects, she is not waiting for you to chase. She is preparing to move on. The greatest mistake a man can make is assuming that love fades slowly, that feelings disappear over time. That is not how it works. A woman may linger for a while, she may stay physically present, but the moment her emotional attachment dies, she is already gone. She is already detached in her mind. And when a woman detaches emotionally, there is no force on earth that can bring her back unless she chooses to return on her own. Most men respond to this silence in one of two ways. They either panic and chase, desperately trying to pull her back, or they get angry and bitter, blaming her for pulling away. But both of these reactions stem from weakness. Both come from a place of fear. And fear is the fastest way to destroy any remaining respect she may have had for you. Because a man who is truly grounded, a man who understands his own worth, does not need to react emotionally to the withdrawal of someone who no longer values him the same way. A woman does not just stop investing without reason. She pulls away because something within her no longer resonates with you. Maybe she no longer admires you. Maybe she no longer feels the excitement she once did. Maybe she realized that the way she once saw you was built on illusion, not reality. But whatever the reason, the outcome is the same. Her emotional energy has shifted, and that shift is always followed by silence. This is why you must never chase someone who is pulling away. You must never beg for someone's attention, because the moment you do, you are telling them that their absence has more power over you than your own presence. A man who understands his value does not crumble when someone chooses to walk away. He does not need to plead. He does not need to convince. He does not need to remind her of what they once had, because he knows that if she cannot see his worth, then it is not his job to prove it. It is her loss to realize. A woman respects a man who does not fold under pressure, who does not let her distance turn him into someone desperate for validation, who does not let the silence consume him, but instead allows it to refine him, to sharpen him, to make him even more focused on his own mission. Because attraction is not built on attachment. It is built on presence. And the moment a man loses himself in the fear of losing a woman, he has already lost her respect. You must understand that people do not forget those who leave an impact. A woman does not simply stop thinking about a man who once challenged her, inspired her, led her. She does not just erase someone who left a mark on her soul. If she is no longer calling, no longer texting, no longer trying, it is because something in her no longer sees you as that man. And instead of chasing, instead of demanding answers, instead of trying to force back what has already slipped away, the only real answer is to rise higher than you were before. Because a man who is truly on his path, a man who is fully immersed in his own evolution, does not have time to mourn the absence of someone who no longer values his presence. He does not have the energy to waste on wondering why she changed, why she pulled away, why she no longer feels the same. He is too focused on becoming the strongest, sharpest, most unshakable version of himself. And that is exactly why, in the end, she will feel his absence far more than he ever felt hers. Silence is not the end. It is the test. It is the moment where you decide whether you will break or whether you will build, whether you will let the loss of someone else define you or whether you will use it as fuel to become someone who no longer needs them. Because the truth is, the moment you stop needing anyone, the moment you stop relying on external validation, is the moment you become the kind of man that no one dares to walk away from without regret. A woman's silence is a mirror. It forces you to face yourself, to ask the hard questions, to recognize where you have lost your edge, where you have settled into comfort, where you have allowed yourself to drift into complacency. And if you have the courage to look into that mirror without flinching, without running, without denying what you see, then you have the power to transform, to rise, to become so unshakable that whether she returns or not is no longer your concern. Men who understand their worth do not wait for a woman to decide their value. They do not need reassurance. They do not need closure. Because the moment she chose to walk away, she made her decision. And the only thing left for you to do is make yours. To choose whether you will shrink in the face of loss or whether you will use it as fuel to become greater than ever before. You do not convince someone to stay. You do not beg for their attention. You do not fight for a place in the life of someone who has already chosen to walk away. What you do is build yourself into such an undeniable force that whether she stays or not, whether she regrets or not, whether she comes back or not, is irrelevant, because by that point, you are already too far ahead to care. That is what it means to be a man of value. To never chase what is retreating, to never crumble in the face of silence, to never let the absence of another person shake the foundation of who you are. Because at the end of the day, the only thing you ever truly have control over is yourself. And the moment you master that, the moment you realize that your worth is not determined by who stays or who leaves, you become unstoppable. She stopped calling, stopped texting, stopped trying. And now you have a choice. You can sit in self-pity, you can wallow in confusion, you can chase what has already slipped away, or you can rise. You can sharpen your mind, strengthen your body, refine your purpose. You can become such a force that her silence no longer haunts you because you are too focused on your own greatness to even notice. And when you reach that level, when you truly embody that mindset, when you become so driven that nothing outside of you can shake you, then whether she comes back or not is no longer relevant, because by then you have already won. When she stops calling, stops texting, stops reaching out, she is giving you the clearest answer you will ever get. And the way you respond to that silence determines everything. You can react like a man who has lost control, chasing, pleading, searching for explanations, or you can rise above it. You can let it refine you instead of breaking you. Because the truth is, No woman truly forgets a man of value. She may walk away, she may grow distant, but the impact of a strong, unshakable man is never erased. Your worth is not measured by who stays or who leaves. It is measured by the way you carry yourself, regardless of what happens. The moment you stop seeking validation, the moment you stop needing reassurance, the moment you stop begging for someone's presence, you become the kind of man who never has to chase to the strength. So let her go. Let her silence be the lesson that makes you unstoppable. Let this moment be the catalyst that pushes you into becoming the strongest, sharpest, most undeniable version of yourself. Because when you do that, when you truly embrace your own power, it won't be you wondering why she disappeared. It will be her realizing what she lost.